Soy Montserrat Peidró y estáis viendo PackSite Live.
AI's here, and it is going to fundamentally change the way we work.
I could feel the chat bubbling with, when do we get hit?
It will bring up an average performer up to a bit higher level.
It's going to change the way we are efficient. It's going to make us better.
Building a strategic AI plan, I think, is really kind of a starting focus we're kind of having.
As we go forward with AI for a customer, for an MSP, we need to ensure that our customers have a very strong security posture.
Where's your data coming from? How are you getting it back out again? Are you really set up for success when it comes to structured AI implementation?
Do we have the right controls in place? The cybersecurity landscape is constantly evolving.
We at PackSite want to help our partners to get in front of their customers early and have the right conversations about how to move forward into these AI technologies.
Get involved with us. That's the best way to do it.
Yes, you do have to use separate passwords for everything. Yes, where possible, SSO is probably safer. You should likely use a password manager. How do I move through this world with very little imprint, leaving as few breadcrumbs as possible?
If we can show folks what that cyber hygiene is supposed to be, we can help change the culture and the mindset and how we approach things.
Every client you add as a result of the role you play within their organization is a risk that you cannot get rid of.
What's up, everyone? Happy Friday, and welcome to the game on PackSite Live, the show where we talk about all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of. We're going to have a great show today. We're going to have Keith Barthold joining us later, but before we jump in, let me do the housekeeping. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. If you're going to interact with us, the best place to do it is on YouTube. That's PackSite Cloud on YouTube. You can't miss it. If you comment on YouTube, we can pull it up on the screen. We can make this a really interactive show. So if you're watching on LinkedIn, join us on YouTube. Don't forget to sign up for PackSite Beyond, and let's jump. Oh, I should mention there's about 2 weeks left of early bird pricing, and then that price ratchets up just a smidge again. And I do believe the last update I got is that we're almost out of tickets. So that's the last message I got from Rob. Maybe we'll have to confirm that. But with that in mind, let's jump straight into the news. What's up, man?
Man, it's great to see you, Dom. How are you, sir?
I'm all right.
I'm super excited about Beyond, actually. And I know that from last I heard, we had already crushed last year from a number of registrants and people to be here. So I know we're already growing well beyond that. I know that. And I'm really excited about what's being built up for the security track that I get to run with. So, in fact, if anybody's watching, reach out to me. If there's something you just think has to be there in a security track of things that you want to learn, now's your opportunity to kind of make sure that I'm covering that. But Dom, it's a good time to get into the news. I think we're not going to be shocked by this first article. And then also super excited to have Keith here. He is a forward thinker. He is a leader. He is someone that has worked with a wrench in his hand and also moved towards persuading executives and growing leadership himself. So stoked to have my friend Keith here. So yeah, let's get into the news, and then we'll get to that other boring stuff first, and then we'll get to Keith. So color me shocked. The GAO says that 20 federal agencies failed to meet the Biden administration deadline for implementing the most advanced cyber event logging requirements across their systems, with most agencies failing to implement even basic incident tracking standards. Surprised, according to a recent report from the GAO. In a December 4 performance audit of 23 federal civilian agencies, GAO found that many agencies have not met requirements for investigative and remediation event logging capabilities. President Biden in 2021 May cybersecurity executive order said, in part, agencies to establish requirements for logging, log retention, and log management, which shall ensure centralized access to visibility of highest level of security operations, like Control 13.1. We're talking about 8.9 and 13.1. right? The Office of Management and Budget subsequently released a memo in August 2021 that established a kind of a tiered model to help agencies prioritize their efforts, right? And so the report found that 17 agencies had failed to advance beyond complying with OMB's Tier 0 standards, Dom. Tier 0 standards. That's 17/23 of this aspect, just for the math people out there, right? 17/23 here. Until the agencies implement all event logging requirements, the federal government's ability to fully detect, investigate, and remediate cyber threats will be constrained. You think? It seems logical. Let's break out and let's just chat about this, Dom. I don't think we have to beat this to death, but, you know,
man,
just go. Talk me off a ledge here.
Yeah, so 74% failure rate. That's not a great number. And I'm not quite sure what to say, except I too am not shocked. It's kind of ridiculous, right? Like, I don't even know. With what federal agencies typically handle, and I don't know that it went into what specific agencies.
Sure.
This is a problem, right? If we think
Tier 0
about Tier 0. Yeah, the 0 minimum standard. I don't even know how to describe that. Look, this is also par for the course for federal. It's really, really hard to get them to move.
Yep.
And I don't know that there's much repercussion for not meeting the Tier 0 standard, except for getting called out in a GAO report.
Sure.
Like what, you can't sue yourself. So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is, but hopefully we find a way to enforce that and bring it up to Tier 0 at least.
What I want to unpack, so if we talk about what is Control 8, right? Control 8 in CIS, Center for Internet Security, Critical Controls, Control 8, is talking about logging. And I tell my class when I teach my students about this, logging is for when the body's dead, right? This logging is for the forensics at the autopsy table. It's to know what happened, what did we deal with, what did the threat actors do, how can we pivot, how did they get past our tools, what things did they use against us, what were our failures, those are all part of logging. And then you talk about centralizing security alerting. That's 13.1. 13.1 says centralized security alerting, event alerting, right? So you're getting to this point of saying Tier 0 means, like if you're doing this in a sport, Tier 0 is, no, Johnny can't even do the basics. We're not letting him hit anybody. He's not putting on pads. Sorry, you're not playing football, right? That's Tier 0. We're not even at Tier 0. You cannot even put on a face mask and a helmet and do a basic football move. Like you fail and maybe I'm being hyperbolous here, but the point is, there's not many MSPs that have heard this rhetoric I just went off on that could also answer that they're there either. And I think that's maybe the other side of it, is that this is a universal company problem where people are saying, yeah, do I really have 8.9 centralized logging of all the things where I could deal with it in somewhat of an immutable fashion? Or do I have 13.1? Do I have some type of central place where all event alerting goes to, or security event alerting to, or some set of central places? And then I can report upon those and I can have intelligence. And I was asking my class, why do we care about centralization? Well, there's speed, there's efficacy, there's storyline, but there's also this other aspect of centralization, which includes contextualization, right? And the ability to understand the scenario of events and what happened and put things into context that otherwise wouldn't be in context. And anyways, getting a little more rhetorical than I should, but the point being, if our government agencies can't even be held at a 17/23 ratio, how do we have the SEC suing under the auspices of our public companies in the same problem? I guess is my at least my hypocrisy.
That's a good question.
All right, fine. We're done beating the federal agencies up enough, I think, Dom. Let's see the next one. What do we have? I guess we're not. We're not done beating up. No, I guess we're beating up the public and private sector in a different way now. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure, or CISA, said today that it is investigating a breach at a business intelligence company, Cysense, which is very strange of this investigating part anyways. We'll come back from that. Whose products are designed to allow companies to view the status of multiple third-party online services in a single dashboard, obviously, right, single pane of glass vision, and says, hey, listen, we need to urge Cysense customers to reset credentials. And it is the same information given on their site if you go look at it. New York City-based Cysense has more than 1,000 customers across a range of industry verticals, including financial services, telecommunications, blah, blah, blah. On the 10th, Cysense Chief Information Security Officer Sangram said, that they had been made aware of reports of a certain Sisense company information made available, right, from a threat actor, presumably. We are taking this matter seriously and promptly commenced an investigation, so they're going on about that. In this alert, though, as we go forward, they said, out of an abundance of caution while we continue the investigation, we urge you to promptly rotate any credentials. CISA goes on to say, CISA is taking an active role in collaborating with private industry partners, which is great, to respond to this incident, especially as it relates to impacted critical infrastructure sector organizations, the sparse alert reads. Sisense declined to comment, and we've seen several people write about the veracity of the information shared by two trusted sources with close knowledge to say, and this is what's crazy, is that these threat actors had access to their GitLab or their production lab environment for how you CI/CD pipeline managing your code repositories and how you bring those to production. And in that repository was a token or credential that gave the threat actors Sisense Amazon S3 buckets. From that access, you use GitLab. They just kind of go to describe what they're doing with GitLab as a self-management deployment. Krebs on security says both sources said the attacks used S3 access to copy and exfiltrate several terabytes worth of Sisense customer data, which apparently included millions of access tokens. All right, let's pause there. Let's just pause right there if we can pause the news and just pause. If not, we can just go away from the news. I don't care. Let's just talk about it. Access tokens. And this is it. Thank you. The incident raises questions about whether Sisense was doing enough to protect sensitive data. Okay, let's talk about it. Dom, what's an access token?
It's a key. Like it's a house key, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is literally when you sign into Microsoft, and if you've ever looked at your cookie editor and looked at cookies that are stored, you are granted a access token. It's part of the OAuth handshaking process in which you now have this bearer identity, meaning I'm me, right. I has the key, to Dom's point. And so what we're talking about here is in this Sisense, they actually did steal access tokens. What access tokens? Presumably the access tokens that were being used and consumed. This is presumption. This is definitely a bit of conjecture here. But presumably the tokens in the platform being used to manage these other assets, right?
Right.
And now that means I now have access, admin or otherwise. I don't know what the level of access Sisense platform has as a reporting central pane of glass, but at least view-only capabilities into lots and lots of very juicy things. And if I am in battle, Dom, I have just created a battle plan, haven't I? I now have the ability potentially to access lots and lots of stuff. And that's probably why
well,
the
and remember
caution.
when you're generating API tokens or access keys, you know, they go by many names, but let's take an Amazon access key, for example. You set the permissions. Sisense or whatever you're integrating doesn't set the permissions.
Right.
So how many of those keys
Unless
were
it's
built
automated.
lazily?
Yeah.
Right, but how many of those keys were built lazily?
Yep.
With least privilege on
broad
access.
access.
They're just
yep.
root. Like they could just do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And I would venture a lot of them are in that boat, right? Just go whip up an access key, give it to Sisense, and call it a day.
And now
they probably don't expire. They probably, I mean.
Well, now what I want to paint together is let's paint story one, which says 17/23 can't take an order 2 years later and execute, or 3 if Matt could math, which is 3 years, right? And then now we paint second picture of lots of these entities potentially, and this is obviously could be private, public sector. I don't know the total extent. She says critical infrastructure. They're taking an active role. My gut says this has a high predominance across CI, critical infrastructure space. And my point is that they're probably not going to act fast. We've seen it in MoveIt. We've seen it in other situations where they just suck at this. And so now you have a situation where someone's saying, please rotate your keys because they've probably been compromised. And if people don't do that, then the outfall from this gets even larger, right? And that's the same thing we saw with like SolarWinds, same thing we see with Log4j, same thing we saw with almost every type of vulnerability is there's always this compendium that doesn't deal with it. And then the fallout from that gets deeper buried, has deeper access, has broader access, has broader data, has broader expanse. And that means I have a better battlefield plan. I know more and more about what I'm actually dealing with and what I want to steal and what I want to do. All right, I'm gonna like blow a blood vessel today on this one, but yeah, okay. I think we're good on this one. Let's
and one thing to point out is the whole point of building these access keys is to automate stuff, right? So I could take however many access keys I've successfully stolen, or tokens or whatever, dump them into a CSV, run them through a script, and just mass execute. So I'll get denied on some percentage of them doing what I want to do, but I could just fly through millions of access keys.
And they're often patterned, ASIA, AKIA. Those are both going to be AWS keys, right? I already know that I can go apply them to an AWS context and check them. And there's lots of ways to abuse it. In fact, if you haven't taken this,
total
there's
tangent.
Yeah, go.
So GitHub allows regex search nowadays on their advanced.
Oh,
search,
healthy! That makes it super easy to parse for these things.
It's fun. You should go to GitHub and do a regex
I have.
search
You and I have
that.
done this together. Yeah, that's right. We
so
found those keys. Yeah.
many fucking Amazon access keys on GitHub. So if you're bored,
true story.
True story. Don't do anything illegal with them, but there's a lot.
True story. All right, so back to the news. This point is, I think this will be a developing story. We will see more out of Sisense. I do believe that. So we can go on to the next article. Sorry about that. Thank you. All right, so LastPass. Hackers targeted an employee and failed deepfake CEO call. This is awesome. We've got to get a win for LastPass. It makes my heart very warm. I love several of the people over there that I've gotten to interact with. LastPass revealed this week that threat actors targeted one of its employees in a voice phishing or vishing attack using deepfake audio to impersonate the company's chief executive officer. However, while 25% of the people have been people have been on the receiving end of an AI voice impersonation scam or know someone who has, that's a broad expanse. According to a recent global study, the LastPass employee didn't fall for it because the attacker used WhatsApp, which is a very uncommon business channel. In our case, an employee received a series of calls, texts that were outside of voicemail featuring audio deepfakes from a threat actor impersonating our CEO via WhatsApp. LastPass intelligence analyst Mike Kosak said. As the attempted communication was outside of our normal business communication channels, the employee's suspicion regarding the presence raised social engineering attack such as forced urgency. Our employee rightly ignored the messages and reported the incident to our internal team. Let's stop there so we don't have to look at this too much longer. We're a little bit behind anyway. I'm ready to talk to my buddy Keith with the brisket rolling. Okay, so when you think about this, this is a win. This is where, people talk about humans being the worst layer of defense. I disagree. Humans are probably the best layer. And what I mean is they probably get it right 99.9% of the time, and we only see the one where they failed when we really get into it. And this is actually a great example of them winning, right? You have a deep fake, which presumably sounded like the CEO. That's the whole point of these deep fakes. They're easy to make. But they used a non-standard comms channel. And that tipped them off. And my point is, like, in the past, you would have had a user that would have been like, all right, fine, it's just my weird CEO doing weird stuff. It's fine, we'll do, but we deal with this now, and you see an employee going, no, I've been trained. This is two things. One, it was something as a non-standard comms channel. And two, I've been trained that there was an escalation of urgency that wouldn't normally persist. Okay, I just want to hone in on for just a second, just live as a practitioner and take our wins. This is one where somebody saw something, said something, and now we get to tell a story about it. So good stuff.
So John doesn't really need those Apple gift cards I've been sending him?
I've been sending them for 3 months. I expense them, and they just keep accepting them as a company. It's really strange. But yeah, I figured that was John. He's really serious on his WhatsApp skills, man. It's amazing.
Yeah.
He started sending it on TikTok last time. That was really strange. No, yeah, and it's a good reminder. If you're dealing with your security programs, let's talk about those things. And oftentimes we check the box in Control 14, 14.1, 14.2 about security and education and social engineering specifically. And the problem is we haven't given any of the contextual anchors necessary to be successful. We haven't trained them on their systems. We've taught them about, hey, guess what? Some mythical, magical unicorn might one day do something that's outside of band and be different. But how often do we actually say the ways you will be communicated with in this company will be only as following, and these are the things that would be abnormal, right? If that CEO says, I'm never going to contact you on a cell phone, not ever. It will not come through a text message on a cell phone. I will call you, and then I will say these. That's a very different methodology and deeper training that's required that we're just not doing. For most MSPs to their end client base, if I'm candid. So at least correct me if I'm wrong. If you're in the comments and you're like, no, I am doing that, then slam dunk, I love you with all my heart. Thank you. Please put the comments in. We'll highlight them up. So, all right, Dom, any thoughts to add to this one?
No, it's a good win, and I appreciate that they're talking about the win because not many companies talk about wins, and that's a really cool. It's a great article. That's a great article to read. So kudos to LastPass for shouting it out. And understand if you're watching and you're not experienced. 10 seconds, 15 seconds of audio is all someone needs to generate an AI version of you. So it is very easy to perform this sort of attack.
But you know what, Dom? I bet they do not get my Matt-isms and colloquialisms at all. They're probably not going to nail that.
Got a layer of
I got a layer of protection there for sure. Well, let's hear some brilliant words instead of the stuff coming out of my mouth from Robin Harris, and then we'll be back with Keith Barthold to talk about leadership.
Let's talk about seasonal scams. We're coming into tax season. I haven't done mine yet. But you will notice that the bad guys, they key up on what's happening with every season. So this is the season where tax scams are going to become very prevalent. You know, when you go to the fall and you go into the holidays, the end of the year holidays, you're going to have the Good Fridays and all this other kind of stuff, the Christmas. We need to be situationally aware of what's going on in the environment that the bad guys can tap into and get into our mailbox and have us clicking. Now, I'm going to tell you something that has happened, and it's a downside of AI. We used to be able to depend on the bad guys can't spell. Well, guess what? They're using AI to start creating better phishing scams. The emails are going to start looking more and more legitimate, and we are going to have to raise our level of awareness to really be able to spot those. And tapping into seasonal scams and the right language and really looking authentic is going to give them an advantage. And we have to be prepared for that. Personally and in our jobs. It's just not enough for us to do the annual training and say, okay, I've done that, check that box. The bad guys are so committed, and they are committed to continuous growth, and they're learning. They are learning where we're lazy. They're learning where we're not paying attention. They're learning where we have vulnerabilities. And we have to, on the other end, stay up to par in that game. And we have to present our defenses, and our employees are the first line of defense, because an employee clicking on an email can devastate a company. So I'm going to invite you to actually look at how you can really dial in your testing of your people's awareness during the seasons with your phishing testing, and make sure that you set up testing that's starting to play at the same level that the criminals are playing, so that you can keep your people aware of, oh, I need to be aware of, is this a real and legitimate email, or is this a scam? So if you're not testing your employees regularly, if you're not testing your employees seasonally, you're missing a training opportunity that could literally save your business.
Okay, so 100% from Robin. I mean, talking about really almost validating what we talked about, which is this focusing on the positive and focusing on this fact that they are our first line of defense. But also in this understanding that, you know, I was asked in a call or a speech I was doing for a bunch of Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 CISOs, Matt, how did you measure effective phishing campaigns? Because just measuring click or not click is tough, right? I throw them away every time. I don't learn anything about it. And I said, my argument is to shift the measurement, and Robin kind of spoke on this, to shift the measurement towards things that are outside of that testing metric, meaning like if I train Dom with phishing tests seasonally, and as Robin's describing, and I then have that result, can I also see that Dom's sending in stuff that is actually malicious, is sending in stuff that is actually benign, right, that he thinks is malicious? I would measure how much you're sending in stuff that's not part of my testing program, right? That's my measurement of success, of changing an employee's capabilities and heart. But anyways, just a thought to exit from that. So let's bring on Keith. Keith is an awesome friend of mine and very forward-leaning person. Keith, tell everybody who you are, what you do, and where you're at today.
Yeah, so I'm Keith Barthold. I'm the founder and CEO of DKBinnovative. Here in my backyard in North Texas, smoking up some barbecue, and yeah, have just gotten to know Matt and really enjoy working with the community. You know, I 6 months ago exited and sold DKBinnovative to Evergreen, and I'm still in place as a CEO. And using more and more as an advisor and just as a coach and a mentor to other businesses, and just loving life.
How has it already been 6 months, man? Like I don't even know how that's possible.
It's
it felt
wild.
Like it was just 2 days ago you called me and told me. It's MSP life, I think.
yeah, MSP life. It's pretty surreal. So definitely a different dynamic now, and I'm enjoying it. The pressure that was rising through the exit and due diligence and all of that is kind of behind, and now it's just create enterprise value for DKB and for the rest of the platform.
And to put it in perspective, just for people that are watching, the scale, when you were still as your DKB before the merger and that partnership that you have now, you guys were a fairly large-sized MSP too, and fairly, I would say sophisticated in at least my experience of working with you.
Yeah. So in 11 years, took it from 0 to 13 million in revenue and 62 employees, and continue to grow today.
And working in some compliance spaces and working with people that had higher security needs too, as I remember our conversation. Is that also correct?
Yeah, for sure. We were very fortunate in that when I founded DKB, I came out of a 10-year career at Perot Systems, Dell, was working with Tenet Healthcare. So I was in charge of medical records transformation for 60 hospitals and spinning up about 150 physician offices. You get to understand HIPAA compliance and security. And so, day one, we were a security company where a lot of MSPs have had to adapt and, over the past 5-10 years, try to become and learn how to become a security company. And we started that way day one.
And the reason I went through all that is I just wanted to establish your credibility for the security aspects of this show, because we're going to be focusing on leadership, and I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that the game had somehow lost its roots here. That you are a security-focused human. So, cool. Yeah. And I want to share with the audience how I met you. You and I had met through some mutual friends. I think we were introduced and both had a very security focus, and then this ended up happening, right? So,
what's better, trust or faith?
Wow, that is a tough question, right?
I only asked you a hard one to see if I could keep you from dropping into another spin.
Yeah. I think it's evidence-based trust, really. It's looking at the evidence and going, look, it's certainly not about blind faith.
Right.
Like this plane, I got to trust my instruments.
Yeah.
But also got to trust all of the inputs that are around me. I bring all of that evidence together, and that's what's going to build the story. That's how we proceed in cybersecurity. As we look at what our tools are indicating, we look at our best practices. We talk with our clients, and how is this experience? How is the safeguard, the control? How's it impacting your business and your people, your users? It's getting all of that input together, and then making great decisions based on the evidence.
100%, man. I think that's the point, is we should be that lever mover, that helping our partners that are our clients know what's the next thing, but also asking, how's this impacting you? Have we made your business worse for what we're doing? I tell people all the time, you can spend $1 million protecting $1, and at the same time you can also put so many stops in place that you can't grow your business from security. So it's that balance, right? It's that fine tuning and trimming of it.
So we met with you doing flips and drops and stalls and spins for a 45-minute podcast.
You've been one of my most impressive guests, Matt, because I was flying you upside down and going into like 4 rotation spin, pulling G's, and you just continued to talk, like not even taking a breath. Until at one point I looked up, and like these beads of sweat were rolling down your head. And I was like, how you feeling, Matt? You're looking a little green. And you're like, bro, like maybe straight and level just for a minute. Straight and level right now.
And the other thing I think I learned out of that was really interesting was, those feelings that come from that when you have the stick, you don't have the same problem. There's this almost control aspect of that was really interesting. It went away really quickly. But to your point, we did talk about cybersecurity pulling more than 3Gs and holding that at sustained levels for a while. And I had a blast. It was great. But some of the conversations that came out of there were really leadership centric and driving that. And that seems to be one of the passions you wanted to talk about. How do you stay a leader, and how do you have that leadership and establish trust with your client base? I mean, that's a great topic to kind of delve into, I think.
Man, I think it's just really continuous learning and really empathizing with what your clients are dealing with. Like, it's an understanding that they're not excited about security like we are, and they don't want to spend money on security, and you got to realize that. But at the same time, you got to empathize with them that this is a different world, and it keeps changing. The threats keep rising, and they've got to adapt to those threats just like we do in our own business. And you've got a responsibility to relay that in a way that is really business. You've got to talk in their terms as a business person, not as a nerd, or it just is not going to resonate, and they're not going to make great decisions.
Yeah, 100%. I think when we talk about this with the business person and you're having these conversations, and let's go back to that flight conversation about elements like I can trust my security tools. I have to trust the best practices. I have to trust those. How do you deal with the fact that when you start looking at your customers, oftentimes they don't have the best practices, and they don't have the right tools, and they don't have the telemetry, and they haven't elected to do that thing or this thing? How do you have those tough conversations? I mean, I think that's what I'd really like to dig into today is how do you have that conversation, and what are some of those tough conversations you've had?
Yeah, I think the tough conversations are, I love the analogy that Wes Spencer gives. And that's that it's really like you being a doctor. And if I was to go into a doctor's office and say, hey doc, like, man, my stomach is just really hurting and I can't get over it, and I've tried these things, but I'm in some serious pain. One, the doctor is going to have good bedside manner and show empathy. A great doctor is going to go like, I'm so sorry, this is disrupting your life, and
Sure.
Like, let's talk through it and let's diagnose the problem. Let's talk about diet. Let's talk about exercise, family history, all of these things.
Well,
but
hold
there's
on,
a moment.
Pause real quick though.
Sure.
Because that part of that is this kind of evidence and telemetry gathering, right? So there's empathy that's building that first piece of, I care about you, Keith. I understand what you're going through. I can empathize how much this sucks. I really want to solve this. But then there's that evidence gathering. Are you exercising? Are you eating Thai food with spicy Thai hot every night? Are there things that you might be doing in an environmental basis that are part of this? Okay, continue. I just wanted to dig into that's what's happening here with that doctor environment. Yeah.
So it's asking questions, and we're going to ask a lot of questions and understand the business. That's going to create engagement. It's going to build rapport to where you have a genuine interest in their business. The technical side, right, and focus on the symptoms, but also focus on the person and the business and how they make money, how they operate. It's important to that telemetry to get all that information in. But there's a point, and I think what separates a bad doctor from a good doctor really is when you get frustrated and you go, oh my gosh, you're serious? Like, you need me to have to do some labs?
Sure.
You need me to do some tests? I don't have time in my schedule, and that sounds really expensive, and I haven't saved up and budgeted for that. You know what? Just give me some pain pills, and I'm on my way out of here. A terrible doctor says, yeah, I understand. It does stink. Yeah, I'm just going to write you a script and leave you on your way. A great doctor goes, time out. I'm the expert here. I don't care what you've looked up on WebMD. I've seen this 1,000 times. Dude, you might have cancer. Like, you could have colon cancer, and I care too much about you to see you walk out of here and you maybe die because you didn't take this seriously and you didn't take the treatment plan. It sucks, but you got to take the treatment plan. Well, there's a point where you've got to establish a command with your clients to go, I've seen this. I'm the expert, and you're about to be a victim unless you do these things and follow these steps. And yes, it's painful, but I love you too much to just let you walk away.
Yeah. It's funny, one of the corollaries that goes along with that from that perspective is if you took this doctor analogy and made it a breach, if you were a patient with that stomach problem and you came back 6 months later to find you have terminal stage 4 cancer and you had skipped that investment in time and money to get the tests done that were asked to be done because of the professional, there's not a single patient in the world that would not have remorse, regret, and also the falling away of any false hubris that was there. And so what's interesting is I've never met a company after a breach that didn't have the budget that survived to then start doing things, right? I've never had a scenario where after that moment, right, Dom?
It's the fastest way. We had this very situation with a large healthcare client that we had signed, and it was a very fractional. We were doing consulting and a small piece of work for them with like 5-6 other IT vendors. And I came to the CFO after, within 3 months and said, hey, like, time out. You got some big issues here. You need to take care of these. And I told him, I'm like, his response was, well, we've got these other priorities. We've got infrastructure to clean up. We're going to set security aside, kick that down the road. And I said, look, the best way to get a budget for security is to have a security event. And I hope to goodness that doesn't happen. It's avoidable.
Sure.
And I kid you not, 3 weeks later, ransomware attack, it took out 80 servers and about 50 workstations. Huge disruption for a healthcare client. We later turned them into a full managed client and full security services client. But I'll never forget him calling me back in the middle of that event and going like, I will not forget that conversation you had with me a few weeks ago where you said like the fastest way is to have a security event. Obviously we have the budget now. I just wish we would have spent the money in advance and not in the middle of this.
I brought that up because I tell a story. I brought that up because I tell a story. Keith, you, me, and Dom are standing on the top of a mountain looking out over the beautiful expanse and crevasse below. And I gently reach over and push Dom to his death. Is there any chance that you, Keith, don't take either a defensive stance, an offensive stance, or a running away stance in some form or fashion to avoid being pushed to the same demise, right? Like that's definitely going to happen. But even in the same boat, has you run down the mountain and get out of the way if you haven't already killed me, which I think you're probably a fight guy, not a flight guy. But that said, as you run down the mountain in my story, and you run into another person coming up and you say, hey, I just watched some dude shove somebody off the mountain. Don't go up there right now. It's not safe. Hang tight. The law enforcement's coming. We're dealing with this. Like, just stay back here. Is there any chance that person doesn't believe you because of the fire they see in your face and the thing you've seen in somebody? Like, my point is when you have these tough talks, why are good doctors good at having that talk? Because they've watched somebody die. They've watched that fallout. They've watched the remorse. They've seen it. And in the same way, one of the things that I think I carry that's unique is I've gotten to watch a lot of that. And unfortunately, it makes it very easy to go have a very tough and candid conversation that you will believe me about, right? And how much of that is part of your world, Keith, and what you bring to the table in that conversation in your example?
It's a huge part of our world is having tough conversations. And unfortunately, I think we live in a society and maybe we've just been trained to avoid conflict and that we just need to get along. And that's how you operate in business is you got to have, everybody's got to like you and you need to get along. And, man, it's just not true. There's a point where you've got to take command and go, you know what, I'm the expert here and I know better than you. And this is a unique industry that we live in because like the client is almost never right. It's true, right?
Wow.
You heard it here, folks. And yeah. Unfortunately, that's the case, right? In the SMB space, anyway. So,
that's
there's
why
a
we
point
do
where
what
you
we
got to
do.
turn that around. Yeah, they wouldn't
Yeah.
need you if they knew what they were doing and they were experts.
Well, but there's
in this
more
and
to that
they were
too,
wise in
right?
it.
Because Keith, there's not many other professional environments where you just have to take me on faith that I know what I'm talking about. And it's not going to be any level of trust or anything observable or provable for most people in that space. It's all faith, right? And so when you think about my CPA, I know that AI CPA at some point has said this person is a qualified person to hold the CPA. If I hire an attorney, even the crappiest Saul Goodman attorney I can hire, they have been past the bar exam. They are the minimum. I said this on Red Queen Dynamics. It's the minimum viable crappiness, the MVC, right? We don't have an MVC in our world. There is no minimum viable crappiness. There's no license. There's no state regulation body. If I get my hair cut, if I get this beautiful beard of mine cut, there's a board of cosmetology saying that some young guy or girl can wield a pair of scissors to cut my beard. That exists. But in our world, there is nothing to that. So when you're trying to prove professionalism and trying to have those hard talks, you have to be professional. You have to know it. You have to have these things. But in the same breath, they don't know if you're full of crap or not. And that is part of the challenge. And so how do you overcome that part of it when you're having those tough conversations of, Keith, how do I know what you're telling me is the truth? How do you overcome that? How do you manage that today?
Yeah. So for us, it's like this extreme level of transparency. And just acknowledging that and just telling those prospects and clients like, hey, I acknowledge that my industry is a lot of smoke and mirrors, and I'm sorry for that. You've probably been burned before. Like let's just step back and admit that I could just be here in a logoed shirt, and I could have just spun up a website with Wix and a bunch of stock photos and pretend everything. Be really easy. So I need you as a wise buyer here and a wise consumer to dig in. You need to do your due diligence. And in return, what I'm going to do is just extreme transparency. I want you to come into my office. I want you to talk to my people. When we talk about documentation, we talk about process and streamlinings. I want you to just call time out and go, hey, that seems like bullshit. I want to see it.
Nice.
And like give you the opportunity to look at what we're doing. And you should demand reports. You should demand dashboards. Not that you're going to we do dashboards.
Find immense value from them or any of that. It's the transparency.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're not going to be looking at that every day, and that's not the purpose. The purpose is that I'm holding myself accountable and my team accountable by this extreme level of transparency. Trust but verify.
You know, it's funny. So Rob Reck, I don't know if you caught this episode or not, but Rob Reck, our chief trust officer, came on, and he has 3 tenets that he follows, right? Number 1 is having a 1-to-1 say-do ratio. If I say I'm going to do it, I better do it. 1-to-1 say-do ratio. Number 2 was have the tough conversations. It's the radical transparency. It is the straight up, here's what I mean. It's exactly what you just pinned out as a conversation. And the last one, which we haven't really tackled, there hasn't been something here, and maybe there's something to unpack here, is aligned incentives, right? The last piece of how you make trust is aligned incentives, that Keith is going to profit in the same way I am. And I think there is something to that from at least traditional MSP, right? That was the whole value of me saying, when I bill you by the hour, you're down when I'm winning. And when I bill you by the hour and you're up, I'm losing. Then let's get to a number that lets us be completely in the same direction, proactive, driving stuff to success where we both win at all times. That was the beginnings of an MSP pitch. So how does this apply to security? How do you have aligned incentives from a conversation point as when you're having these tough conversations? How do you show those aligned incentives? Any thoughts come to mind?
And that's a tough one. It really is. And I think you just have to have that in mind. So you're creating this amazing buying experience for your clients. You've got to make it to where there's clarity. And look, it's tough because we're providing co-managed services to where my audience and my buyer persona is a CIO or an IT director. In other instances, it's a CFO or COO or CEO. It can be different just depending on that client in different industries. It's very tough, but you do have to present in a way to where, one, the client understands it, whoever you're presenting to, they get it, and that they're impressed by it and can really see the value, but also to where the edges are clearly enough defined that they can see why you charge for this and then
Sure.
where maybe this is included. Just transparency in how you charge, I think, is one way that you earn that trust. Nobody
Sure.
wants surprise bills, and I think you've got to tune your offering with the pricing clear enough to where you can come in and you can guarantee, look, Mr. and Mrs. Client, I guarantee you that you won't get surprise bills, because too many have experienced that, to where they think something's included and then boom, there's an invoice. And talk about disruption and frustration. I mean, I wouldn't appreciate it if I got a surprised invoice from PAX 8.
It's fair.
Be pretty frustrated, right?
Right.
Yeah, true story. I think the other side of it, if I could take a poke at it, Keith, for aligned incentives when it comes to security, is that what I've seen some MSPs doing is saying, we're not going to cover in our normal MSP agreement any incident response hours, right? We're going to be part of it, but we're going to bill you for those hours. You start seeing this interesting play where they're making an aligned incentive to do the basics, to participate in the things that help keep and respond those response hours down, right, in that regard. And so I just think that we already have those aligned incentives. I think it's just about honing in on where those align, where we're common, where we're going toward the same point, where we're heading towards things that are both in our benefit. But we've already done a lot of it with the guise of efficiency and effectiveness, right? As an MSP, talk about your KPIs and those dashboards. You're wanting to highlight that you're doing all the things you said you were going to do, that you were having a 1-to-1 say-do ratio, right? That's essentially what that radical transparency is trying to have there. One of the things that you talked about pre-show. Go ahead.
I was just say, yeah, and I think showing that you are proactively reducing the noise and the number of issues. It's that continuous surfacing risks, showing your clients how you're navigating them through risks and that security journey, and then making sure the number of issues are going down. Like, that is value. At the end of the day, that's value, is being proactive. It's not how quickly you fix their problems. Super important, but they're going to continue to pay you because you make business easier for them and reduce the number of distractions that get in the way of their mission. And you have to show that, and you have to remind them of that over and over.
What's interesting as a combination is, like, that's the same thing we've argued for the last 15 years as being MSPs, is we have to help it show where we've helped, made their life better, make a reduction of their pains. We're just applying it now to security, right? You just inserted the word risk rather than computer not responding when I wanted it to go to a web page, right? Like, you just added in a different component of that. And I think, to your point, what are those kind of things that we would think of? Like, in my mind, it'd be, I see less vulnerabilities over time. I see less of these types of events. I see better phishing scores. I see better, like, tell me, are there any other things I've missed that are part of that kind of helping show telemetry of improvement in risk that come to mind for you?
So, yeah, that's a really tough topic, actually, in security, because we have many years of KPIs related to productivity and reducing the number of issues. But what are the measures of success in security? Man, that's a tough one. It really is. You're right. Reduction of vulnerabilities, fewer number of issues. We're faster at remediating 0 days, as an example.
Sure,
and
that's
and
a good
just
one to
having
track.
that, like, command and. But I think fundamentally it's taking something like a framework, like CIS, or certainly if it's a client that needs compliance, CMMC, and then mapping that back to 800-171 and making clear that this is where you were when we started, and this is your level of maturity.
Sure.
This is where we're at now, and this is where we need to be. And then getting in front of your clients and showing that over and over and over. And so I think for us, yeah, it's not a KPI and it's not a quick read to just look at a dashboard and a metric. But I think showing them where you're taking them on that journey, and that it's not just us, it's you too. We've got a partnership, and we're making you more and more mature and more resilient towards security.
I love that approach in the sense that you now have I'm not setting expectations that this is going to be beeps and boops based. This is about how I take you from where you are to where you need to be. And if you think back to that doctor analogy, that might be in the form of a complete blood count and full panel of tests that say, Matt, we're going to track your LDL and HDL over the next 6 months and see if we can get that in line. And also, that heart rate needs to be better. And hey, that blood pressure, we also need to tackle this heavy weight. I will say, Keith, you and me flying last year in March or so, I was 55 pounds heavier than I am today, right? Those are trackable things. I'm getting in better shape. I am actually getting further on my numbers. I'm looking at those things. And I think to your point, frameworks give you that ability. What I fear, and maybe you can tackle this, is a lot of people have said to me, Matt, you can't talk about frameworks to clients. They don't get it. You can't reference frameworks to clients. You can't use those. Is that a true statement, or do you have places where the framework gets brought into the conversation, Keith?
Not at all. I think the framework is so important. It's the blueprint, it's the map, and anyone that's good in business is going to be used to using some sort of methodology for business planning, even if it's a one-page business plan, writing a budget, a pro forma, writing out their goals. Like, there is structure to business, certainly structure to finance and regulations and gap accounting, all of that. So I think that's a disservice to hide that and keep that away and not bring it up with our clients. I think we have to educate as professionals that frameworks are really, really important. And look, it should also give comfort in your client to know that, hey, this is not smoke and mirrors. They're not making it up as they go. There's an actual guide. There's a standard that they're using. Super important.
Even if you don't have to teach them, right? Like, you don't have to. Yeah, go ahead, Dom. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's massive, right? Because one of the struggles I had is when I was doing this, is how do we know you're building a plan that makes any sense? And I knew it did, but I was tying it back. It was NIST at the time. But when you bring the framework in, my biggest explanation was like, this is a community-based, academically generated set of ideas that are going to drive towards the mission of risk management, right? And then we would do a risk register, and we would start doing qualitative risk analysis, and we would start knocking down those exposure scores from real, genuine business impact, and that was huge, right? And I will add, and I don't know if you're similar, I've never sold a security product. Not once, not an EDR, not a firewall, none of it. We sold business outcomes, right? Has that kind of been your approach and experience of selling the outcome?
Yeah, it is for sure. Like, a lot of you're going to have to go down the path, especially in co-manage, of being specific about some of those tools, and you're going to come across buyers that know a lot of buzzwords, or they've put together an RFP that has those things. But at the end of the day, you've got to reframe the client to go, look, I can answer this and I can walk you through this, but I want you to understand that this isn't important. This is what you should care about, and it is those business outcomes.
Yeah. It's a different kind of efficiency too, right? Like understanding risk and what's the outcome if you don't address this risk. So yeah, I'm a big fan of it. And have you, Matt and I have been doing a lot of talk about diving into tabletopping. We have the tabletop game that we host with PAX 8. And we've seen folks start to play it with customers. I'm curious, because you're in the co-managed space. Have you gone that route of sitting down, doing a tabletop with a customer, and how to go?
Yeah, so we actually have. So that's one of the things that our VCIOs have really leaned into, to go, hey, this is fantastic. We do it regularly for us. We try to do it a couple times a year, record the results, learn from it, involve as much of the team as it makes sense to. But yeah, we provide that now as a service offering, and for our full stack security clients, we're coming in and walking them through that. And I really like that. I think it's a good experience because it's showing leadership and showing that you have their best interests in mind and a command over not just the bits and bytes, but actually what happens in a security event and how we're going to navigate this. Like, I feel like our clients walk away from those exercises with a lot better comfort level to go, yeah, I'm glad that we're working with DKB, and I'm glad that they've got our backs.
I want to make sure I understand that, Keith. You have an offering in which you have someone pay you to show up, walk them through the experience that both sets the experiential feeling of what needs to be done and drives movements and hearts, and also reinforces, I'm glad I hired them. I just wanted to make sure that sunk in as a business opportunity for anybody out there listening, right? Like they walk away better liking you than they did after they paid you. And, you know, when you go through those events, imagine what you're doing. Imagine taking your client through, this detonated, we need to shut down this server. That means these things are going to stop. We now need to do this. What do you want to do next? Those type of events and walking someone through that horrifies them. It sets it in reality for them, and it drives it into, I can't drive the concrete truck to this job. I can't get concrete flowing to this job. I'm going to lose $37,000 this morning if we were simulating that. Do you find that drives movement out of those, Keith, in co-managed or even in managed clients? Does that drive action out of those events? Do you always take away something to change or do?
Yeah, always. Like if it's done well, there's always learning that comes out of that. And I think like setting expectations with your clients that when you do one of those IR tabletops, like everyone's going to learn. Everyone, us included. Like it's practice, and you got to train for the event, and God forbid it actually happens and you have a security event. You talk about how less stressful it's going to be. You know, I wish I had a story of where, you know, somebody had gone through that and, it was way less stress because of that.
I'm glad you don't. I'm okay.
I'm glad I don't, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad I don't.
I'm glad you don't.
I've got to imagine that if any of those clients that have gone through one of those tabletops with us, the stress is probably much less in an event because we've gone through it and practiced it.
Well, why do you walk kids through a hallway out to the fire spot? Why do you train them, little Johnny to hold this door and Jane to hold that one so that the 46 kids can walk out and then we'll count Jane and Johnny? Like, it is to reduce that failure in the operational moment. It's like when you think about military, a lot of the ways and outcomes of a battle can dictate on how much training was provided before for those soldiers, right? You see evidence of certain people placing soldiers' lives as just churned because they don't train them. They're just here, go do this, have fun. Sorry, you're going to be a meat curtain, right? And I think when we get to this, we've often walked around as if we're handing that soldier a rifle the first time when it's time to battle, right? And that's how we've lived. We don't train, we don't practice. But I think if you can imagine, everywhere else, everybody would agree it's a good idea to get the kids to be used to what happens in a fire or when there's an active shooter, that it would be beneficial to me to train. And it goes back to our airplane conversation, Keith, right? Even in this understanding of, go ahead, John.
No, checklist. When we had Alyssa on the show, we talked about, you know, if something's wrong, is there a checklist? Is there a mental memory or muscle of what I'm going to execute on, right?
Yeah, in her point, she was saying.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, go ahead, Keith.
I would say that's not the first time that I landed a plane when I landed it with you, thankfully, right?
It's true. It's true. There's been many stops before. And probably there's been a few times it wasn't the most comfortable to land with you in those early iterations either.
There's been a few times where you kind of have to wrestle the thing to the ground.
Yeah, for sure. But I think the point is that you brought up really well is walking them through that incident not only simulates, and to the deeper level you can be simulative, right? If you can actually shut down the services, if you can make them not function, if you can take them out of operation, to your point, Keith, you learn more. Because now you're like, I didn't know that stupid application depended on this one stupid thing. Oh my gosh, this is a different criticality in our business impact analysis.
The service that doesn't automatically start, that's nowhere.
Yes.
That used to be the bane of my existence.
Oh man, 100%. Anyways, but I think, Keith, to your point right now, are y'all doing mainly theoretical walkthroughs, or are you doing some degree of deep simulation in the environment at this stage, depending on the size of the organizations?
Yeah, so it's theoretical walkthroughs. As much as I would love to do that and take down an environment and it be a deep walkthrough, I don't think we're there yet, and I don't think our clients are there yet.
Sure.
But that would be the ultimate. Now we've used tools, right? We do and we do pen
DR
tests,
testing, things like that. Yeah.
Things like that. But in terms of walking through an actual scenario, no, I love that. We're just not there yet. Neither are the clients.
Yeah, and you wouldn't necessarily have to detonate the ransomware in that instant. You would just take out the assets that would be part of that incident, right? So you'd say, okay, these are non-available. Let's see what happens when they're not available. From that
I mean,
perspective,
just like if you were going to screen test and do a cutover on a migration, right? You just pull the Ethernet cable and be like, that server's gone, right?
Yeah.
Give it 5 minutes,
no
wait
longer
for the
depending
screen.
on DNS. Oh wait, phone system's still tied to that DNS. Damn. Okay, good call. We need to deal with phone system.
Now I have used that in sales conversations, right?
Right.
You know, when somebody says, "Oh, we're fine. We don't need this. We don't need DR. We don't need security," and you know, you close your notebook up and you start to walk away, and you go, "Hey, by the way, just a scenario. Can we go see your server closet real quick? Oh, you've got everything on-prem. Oh, you don't have redundancy. Let's just imagine I poured water on this thing right now. How would that affect your business?"
Yeah,
and
no
then
doubt.
it starts getting the wheels turning like, oh, maybe that is kind of important.
Well, I love this, Keith. We're down to the kind of the very end of this, and I wanted to ask just one closing question. You know, what's one tough conversation? I'm putting you on the spot here. I haven't prepped you. What's one tough conversation an MSP could go have with their client right now? If you were giving Uncle Keith advice here, what would I go have? What tough conversation would you want them to have?
You know, I think it would be to really look at their investments in security and going, let's both have a real conversation, and are you secure enough?
Yeah.
And I think there's a big group that are going to go, yeah, probably not. We're probably not. There's probably still more work to do. I think that's probably the majority.
I'd propose a small change to that tough conversation, and it's this. I know that I have not provided you enough. We haven't done enough. There are things we need to improve in my offering and the things I charge you for. Let's have a tough conversation about where we both need to be for each of us going forward, right? And it's that we know, like you've got those customers, if you're out there, Mr. and Mrs. MSP, that are on the legacy stack, that you didn't increase enough, you know you can't sell to them enough. Why not lead with that conversation of, I know I haven't added enough. There's stuff I need to do that I can't get you to do. Like, have that tough conversation. Yeah, go ahead, Dom.
And add to that, have that transparency of, I've become a better practitioner.
Yes.
I'm up-leveling myself
and
my team. So I know more now, right? And I know that what I'm doing is not there yet.
Yeah. And the distillable
100%.
tough conversation is, I wasn't good enough, but I'm getting there. You need to come with me on this journey, right? Is the point there. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, I think we can't be afraid to say, I look back and see where we were 5 years ago. I see where we were 3 years ago, and I'm embarrassed. I'm super embarrassed when I look at that.
I feel that every day.
Yes.
Yeah, man. You can't be afraid to have that conversation with your clients and say, based on what I've learned and the mistakes I've made with other clients, I can't make this mistake with you. Like, come along on the journey.
And that's radical candor.
That's so
and
powerful for the
tough
relationship. I mean, yeah, I think it's good. I think it's a good thing to just come out and say, look, I've gotten better at this, right? There's so much trust building and just being that honest with your customers.
It's a perfect way to close it out. Keith, I love you. I appreciate you being here. I keep watching your success and your meteoric rise, and I'm just couldn't be happier, brother. It's awesome. So thank you for being with us today.
It. I got some barbecue to slice up. Come on down.
I'll be out at the airfield, brother. You know I'm an hour and a half from you, so I'll see you.
A little airdrop, get a little parachute action.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Right.
RV7 parachute drop of brisket. All right, let's close it out on that. Dom?
Keith, thanks so much for joining us. This has been a fantastic show, and with that in mind, that is our show. We're going to take a little break next week. Matt's got some time off, so you will not see us next week, but on April 26th, you will see us. And we're going to have a nerdy conversation about identity with Mero Fernando.
Yeah.
He is the principal product manager from Intra ID over at Microsoft. We've got some really exciting identity topics to talk about, new MFA journeys and some other stuff. So we're really excited for that. Join us on April 26th at 2 p.m. Mountain. Don't miss all the other PAX8 live shows in between, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.